I hadn't been back to my hometown in over a decade. Life had pulled me away, first to college, then to a job across the country, and eventually into the whirlwind of building a family. But when the invitation to the high school reunion landed in my mailbox, something tugged at me. Maybe it was nostalgia, or perhaps curiosity to see how everyone had changed. Whatever it was, it convinced me to book a flight back to the small town where I grew up. The town was just as I remembered. Quaint houses, the old diner on Main Street still serving the best pies, and the high school looking more or less the same, albeit a fresh coat of paint making it look less weary. Walking into the gymnasium, decked out with balloons and banners proclaiming 10 years later, felt surreal. People I hadn't seen since we were teenagers, now looking fully entrenched in adulthood, mingled around. Some were easily recognizable, while others took a moment or two of squinting and surprised exclamations. I was halfway through catching up with my old science lab partner Jenny, who had become a pediatrician when I saw him. Michael. He was standing near the punch bowl, looking uncomfortably out of place in a suit that was slightly too big for him, just like the old days when he wore his older brother's hand-me-downs. Our eyes met, and for a moment, the years rolled back, and we were those two inseparable friends sharing secrets by the riverbank again. He walked over, and after a brief, awkward hug, we started talking. The conversation was stilted at first, filled with all the banalities of people trying to bridge a decade of silence. As the night wore on, we found our old rhythm, and the words flowed easier. He told me about his job in IT, about his divorce, and about coming back to live with his aging father. I shared my adventures in the city, my kids' antics, and the novel I was trying to write in my scarce free time. The twist came when he hesitated, a look crossing his face that I remembered meant he was wrestling with a decision. "There's something else," he said, his voice dropping. "I'm not just back here for Dad or the reunion. I've been receiving some strange messages." "Messages?" I echoed, my curiosity piqued. "Yeah, anonymous ones. They started a few months ago. At first I thought they were just spam or a wrong number, but they knew things about me, about us," he said, his eyes searching mine for a reaction. "Us?" I couldn't hide my surprise. What could possibly be said about us that would be so secretive now? "They're about something we found that summer before college. The locket. Remember?" he whispered. My heart skipped. Of course I remembered. We had found an old locket buried near the riverbank, not far from where we used to hang out. Inside had been a picture of a woman, her eyes hauntingly familiar, as if I'd seen them somewhere before. We had thought little of it at the time, a cool find that we eventually forgot about as life took over. "Why would anyone care about that old thing now?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "That's just it, I don't know. But the messages say that we took something that wasn't ours to take, something that was very important to someone." As the evening wound down, we agreed to meet the next day by the river, where it all began. Sleep was elusive that night, my mind racing with possibilities. What had we stumbled upon as kids? Who would go through the trouble of tracking us down after all these years? The next day was overcast, a chill in the air as we made our way to the riverbank. The area looked different, more overgrown than I remembered, but the general layout was the same. We found the spot near an old oak tree and started digging, not really expecting to find anything. Hours passed, and frustration was about to get the better of us when my shovel clinked against something metallic. Carefully, we unearthed a small metal box, caked in mud and surprisingly intact. Inside, there was not only the locket we found, but also several old letters and another photograph, this one of the same woman, but this time with a young girl, their resemblance uncanny. "I think this is her daughter," Michael murmured, examining the photograph closely. "And these letters, they're from the woman to her daughter. She was sent away, Michael. Look, it's dated. These are from during the war." The reality hit us both at once. We had uncovered someone's hidden treasures, perhaps buried for safety during a turbulent time, meant to be retrieved later. The mother might never have returned. The daughter, possibly still out there, might still be looking for these mementos. We have to find her, I said decisively. The search wasn't easy. It took months of sifting through records, reaching out to historical societies, and following up on leads that often went nowhere. But finally, we found her, a woman in her 80s, living not too far from our town. The meeting was emotional. The woman, Sarah, had tears in her eyes as she held the locket and read the letters. She had been just a child when her mother had sent her away, promising to follow soon after. But she never did. Sarah had returned after the war, but with no trace of her mother or their belongings, she had assumed the worst. Handing over the box felt like correcting a piece of history. A wrong finally made right. Sarah told us stories of her mother, of their life before the war, filling in the blanks of the woman in the photographs. As Michael and I left Sarah's house that day, there was a sense of closure, of a chapter finally completed. We had started the day as two old friends digging into the past, and ended it by giving a piece of her history back to someone who thought it was lost forever. In the end, the reunion brought more than just classmates back together. It reconnected a family with its past. And for me, it was a reminder that sometimes the most ordinary places hide the most extraordinary stories.
Story 2. I hadn't planned on going to the 20th reunion. High school wasn't exactly the highlight of my life, but when I found the invitation buried under a pile of bills, something about the old, faded school logo stirred a sense of nostalgia in me that was hard to ignore. So there I was, standing at the entrance of our old gym, transformed with fairy lights and banners that screamed, "Class of 2004, still rockin'." The moment I stepped in, I was greeted by the unmistakable sound of laughter and 90s music blaring over the speakers. The room was filled with familiar faces, albeit older, some lined with the marks of time and experience, others barely changed. I scanned the crowd, feeling a mix of anticipation and anxiety. "John, is that really you?" a voice called out behind me. Turning around, I saw Mike Davenport, my once best friend, now a tall man with a touch of gray in his hair, but still sporting the same infectious grin. "Mike! Wow, it's been ages!" I said as we embraced, the years melting away with the warmth between us. As we caught up talking about families and careers, I noticed Sarah, our high school valedictorian, hovering near the punch bowl, looking more or less the same except for her now short, stylish haircut. She caught my eye and waved, a polite but distant acknowledgement. Our high school queen bee, always in control. The evening progressed with rounds of Remember When and awkward silences filled by sips of punch. Then the DJ decided to switch things up, moving from nostalgic hits to slow dances, and that's when I felt a tap on my shoulder. "Care for a dance, John?" It was Elizabeth, my high school crush, who had somehow slipped into the room unnoticed. She looked stunning, her smile still as captivating as I remembered. As we danced, the years faded. We talked about everything and nothing, until she hesitated and then said, "I actually wanted to apologize, John. I knew you liked me back then, and I never really gave you a chance. I thought you deserved to know." Before I could reply, a commotion broke out near the buffet table. We turned to see Mike arguing loudly with Chris, another classmate. Their voices escalated over some old grudge that seemed to have resurrected. Just as it looked like punches might be thrown, our old PE teacher, Mr. Henderson, now bald and rounder, stepped between them, his authoritative voice booming, "Enough! This isn't the football field, boys!" The tension broke, and a few people chuckled, the incident soon becoming another story to add to the evening's entertainment. As the night deepened, secrets began to unravel. Sarah, slightly tipsy, confessed to a small group of us that she had cheated on her final exam. The revelation shocked us, considering her always perfect record. Around 11 p.m., as the crowd thinned, I found myself sitting with a few old friends around a table littered with empty cups and crumpled napkins. We shared stories of triumphs and failures, the unexpected paths our lives had taken. It was then that Michael, usually the quiet one in school, dropped a bombshell. "I'm actually here on borrowed time, guys. I've been battling cancer and, well, it's not looking great," he said, his voice steady but his eyes betraying his fear. The mood sombered instantly. Here we were, living in our past while one of us was fighting for his future. The group rallied around Michael, offering support and sharing words of encouragement, promises to stay in touch for real this time. As the reunion came to a close and we said our goodbyes, I felt a mix of emotions. The night was a roller coaster, from joy to shock to sadness. I realized then how complex and intertwined our lives were, and how this reunion, which I had almost skipped, gave me a new perspective on the value of reconnecting. Driving home, I thought about Elizabeth's apology, Mike and Chris's old rivalry, Sarah's confession, and Michael's courage. It was a night of revelations, reminding me that everyone carries hidden battles and secret joys. The reunion wasn't just a step back in time, it was a step forward in understanding. As I parked in my driveway, I promised myself to keep these connections alive, not to wait for another decade to pass. Because life, as unpredictable and winding as it is best navigated with old friends by your side.